Oh my God. Honestly, I thought I was never going to post again because that's something I do. Welcome back. Today, I am going to be talking about the Backrooms movie. I'm going to be doing a little movie recap review. It's going to be in a similar format as last time when I talked about Obsession. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead, check it out. To start off, I will say I did like this movie and I was fairly excited when I first saw the trailer. I didn't really know much about like the lore of the Backrooms, but I did play. This is so unserious. I did play like Backrooms games or like Roblox. I know that doesn't count. I know that doesn't count, but that's what I did. And I've also just seen like TikToks of like the back rooms, not the original video. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know much about this lore. I didn't know much about this lore going into it. And even after watching, I still don't know much. And I'm okay with that. But if you are someone who is more interested in it, I definitely think you should check it out. It does seem really cool. I think the concept of liminal spaces and like things of that nature is like so interesting. I guess like if you want to say like my favorite subgenre of liminal spaces is like dreamcore. I know that doesn't like necessarily like make sense, but like this is what it is. I think like the concept of liminal spaces is cool because it's a space that's never ending. Sometimes it just feels so familiar. There is a scene in this movie, I will talk about it later, like more in depth. There's the tree room. I don't know if that's right. Christmas room, something like that. It like took me back to like childhood. I don't know like if that was intentional. I don't know if I'm just really going through it. I'm about to experience like a really bad psychosis again. I don't know. That shit was scary. Same with like the pool rooms. I don't know why that feels so fucking familiar. I did watch this movie twice. That's something I'm going to try to do when I do any type of video like this. Like obviously the first time for first impressions, but then like the second time to like really solidify my opinion and also just like as a basic refresher, I guess. I think the Backrooms as an environment is interesting because it's so simple. It's literally just like an office space with nothing in it. And that's the scary part. Like there's nothing. It's never ending. You don't know what's going to be behind any corner. And you're kind of just like fucked, you know? Okay, so like during my first watch, I thought like it started off a little bit slow and mundane. And I will admit I was a little bit bored, but I'm also someone who needs excitement like in the first 5 minutes. I know like that's not necessarily a good thing. I'm like that with shows too. Like when I first started watching like Jujutsu Kaisen, I wasn't like into it. This is like when it first came out. I was like bored. I'm like, where's the action? What's happening? And I think that's okay. It's okay to be that person. Sometimes it takes multiple tries to like something. I'm like that with music. Well, I listen to K-pop. So it's really normal to like listen to like the same song or like same album again and to see if like you get it, especially if it's coming from like your favorite artist or like your favorite group. One thing I did really like about this film is the fact that it somewhat made me get into my head a little bit. Even after like my first watch, I realized that the backrooms are meant to like represent some just based off being a person who doesn't know like or understand the lore. To me, the backrooms is like a space in our mind where we store like a lot of memories, even the ones that we wish to forget, even the ones that are difficult and traumatic for us. It's a space where those memories live and where they hide, as well as like our very hard emotions. The best way I can describe it is that scene from SpongeBob. That's the best way I can explain the backrooms and its meaning and giving it some type of comparison for other people who may not understand, I guess. Like they even brought up this quote in the movie when they were trying to talk about the backrooms. It's like describing a dog to someone who's never seen a dog before. Like it's hard to do. So with our character of Clark, this is Clark. We see a very unhealed man. And when you are someone who is unhealed with like a lot of trauma, addiction, toxic behaviors, they're able to like manifest into something that is eventually bigger than ourselves until it eventually eats us alive. Just a random thought. I also know like a lot of people did not like this movie. And of course, like everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I know like some people thought it was a bit boring and that the pacing was a little too slow. Some people also didn't like the Captain Clark entity. They just thought it wasn't as good as the original entity. But also the I thought the original entity wouldn't, just in my opinion, I don't think it would translate as good on film because it's literally just a stick monster.
Cindy! This is a skeleton! This is bones!
I think if you see like a stick scribble monster, you can take it. That's just me though. Like I said, I don't know the lore. Don't eat me up for that. I'm getting ate up enough. Robin, you're so funny. Thank you, Robin. I thought the build up to the introduction of Captain Clark, I thought that was scary. I thought that was the most terrifying part of Captain Clark. It was the fucking build up. This is a question for all y'all. Do you think it would have been scarier if said entity had that similar build up? I know some of you probably never even fucking watched this film, but for those who did, I will say during my second viewing experience, I was sat. First of all, I was high. Both times. First time was great. Scary, anxiety. Second time, I was next to an annoying ass kid. I'm just gonna say this right here, right now. If you do not know how to act in a fucking movie theater, if you do not know how to shut the fuck up during a movie, just don't go. Wait until that shit hits streaming. Like, why the fuck am I hearing your side commentary when I'm trying to watch this fucking film? It's one thing if it's like this and it's like just like a small side conversation. I don't hear all that shit. But it's one thing when you're loud as fuck just talking just to talk. Teach your kids how to act. So with all that being said, let's get into the recap. So if you don't want to be spoiled, I'll put the timestamp on the screen. The film opens up with a found footage type of situation. We are panning around this little fugly yellow room that looks like an office space type of situation. And in this space, everything feels empty but infinite. From the perspective it's shot from, our camera person is announcing on a radio that he is lost and that they've traveled too far into this space before traveling deeper into said space. During this time, there are things that appear to be very out of like place, kind of. Like a sign, like a sale sign, and furniture embedded into the walls. It's like a really cool shot. And that's one thing I do like. Everything feels so out of whack, so similar but so uncanny. It makes it feel worse. Everything just feels so wrong. It feels like a dream, kinda. This place is just fucking weird. Our camera person eventually gets got by whatever entity is coming his way. And then with that being said, we cut to a flashbacks/present glimpse of our therapist Mary and her childhood home being destroyed. We also meet our lead Clark as he heads into his furniture store. Right off the bat, Clark gets no type of fucking respect. Someone says, this place is a fucking ripoff. Clark, what's going on? We then see Clark and Mary have a session together, and they're discussing Clark's dreams and how there needs to be a reflection in order to change. Let me just say this. Clark is a man who had a lot going on. He wasn't the best of partner. He wasn't, I guess, kind of the best of person, no shade. And it kind of like fucked him up a bit. We then have Clark and Mary act out a memory between him and his ex-wife Barbara. I will say, as someone who's done therapy before, how can I explain this? There were times like during my therapy sessions where I did do like a little role-playing moment to get understanding of how I should have like conversations with people and whatever. I will say it low-key in the moment though was not helpful. Like, I found it so hard to do. I found it so silly because I have this awareness of like you're not the other person I'm supposed to be having this conversation with. And low key, I don't blame Clark if he felt the exact same way. Clark is an alcoholic, and that is something that got in between his and Barbara's relationship. Clark is also a very angry man because he feels as though he does way too much and pays for everything. He's the one paying the price for everything, making all the sacrifices. And that's something that made him resentful towards Barbara because she decided that she wanted to go to school instead of work. And I understand how that could be frustrating for anyone. Sometimes you do not need that extra support, but it's also what you do with that frustration that matters. Clark is a fucking dick just based off of like some of the things he's saying during this fucking role play because he realized said this shit to fucking Barbara. He did tell Barbara to basically get off her fat fucking ass and work.
Get your fucking ass up and work.
And in this role play, we see how quick Clark is to go from 0 to 10, especially when it comes to others holding him accountable for his actions, like the constant drinking, intoxication, and just not being there as a partner. In Clark's mind, however, just because he's wrong doesn't mean you can call him out for being fucking wrong. It's also important to note that everything that doesn't go right for him, it's automatically everyone else's fault. Like him not being an architect, working a shitty fucking job, and being alone is everybody else's doing and not his. And like the alcohol is how he copes with basically being a fucking loser. That's Clark to a T. There's no other way to describe Clark. Yes, he's a complex character. Yes, you kind of feel bad for him because he has nothing and he's alone. But also at the same time, he did that shit to himself. We then cut to our first glimpse of the Captain Clark character. Clark is shooting a commercial for his furniture store. We also meet his employee Kat and her boyfriend Bobby. So when this little commercial shoot is over, we see Clark in his little office. An electrician comes by and basically Clark's explaining how he's been having electrical issues as of late. And when they check out like the breaker box, is that what it's called? The breaker box? I don't know. When they check it out, they notice a random circuit, a random switch, I guess, that's out of place. They fuck around with it. It is now evening, and we see Mary at home watching TV. And we then pan to the handprint she kept from her destroyed childhood home. We then cut back to Clark, who is, I guess, living in the store, and he is watching TV and drinking again. And there's a commercial for another store playing before it switches to footage from the Backrooms itself, before ultimately switching off completely. Clark is a little bit confused because he was just watching this random ass commercial and now he's watching this random ass office space. And as this is happening, Clark then sees the downstairs area of the store's lights flickering on and off, and this is where the breaker box and strange switch is stored. Clark is irritated as fuck, and he goes down to investigate what's happening and to see if he can fix this fucking breaker. He tries correcting the breaker to fix the issue. However, he stumbles across a crevice. We're using big words here. And when Clark gets closer, he falls through and enters the back rooms. Like I said, the concept of the back rooms is great. I just hate the fugly yellow light. It's like turning on the big light in the room, clearly. Clark is shocked and he does a double take to see he's not just seeing shit because he's drunk. He enters a room with a pile of just random ass furniture in the middle of it. Kind of like the same furniture that you see in his store, but it's also like distorted and some are like morphed together. And Clark eventually decides to venture off a bit further after his first initial shock. He then comes across a backward stop sign and a dead pigeon before he decides to walk through an open door. Personally, I wouldn't have walked past the entryway. That's just me, you know. I guess I'm chicken shit. I don't know. Why would you go in deeper, especially if it's like your first time encountering something like that all by yourself, mind you? No type of survival skills. When Clark ventures off a bit further, he hears this odd noise and he comes across a caveman cardboard cutout that I said that all types of like confused that is speaking in various languages. The cutout is in front of a room with a very random and out of place door slash cord, and it goes to absolutely nowhere when Clark tries to open the door. And as Clark is exploring this room, there's also like a very random security camera that's just like out there. It just felt very out of place. As Clark is exploring this room, he comes across a hidden tiny doorway and he decides to yell hello through it, and I didn't like that. Why would you do that? He eventually crawls through the space and enters another room with a crooked throne and shoes embedded into the ground. There's also a hole in the floor with chairs somewhat blocking it off. And the best way I can think about that or compare it to anything is the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland, specifically the live action. There's also another wall that looks like an optical illusion to another tiny door. I honestly would hate to explore the back rooms on shrooms. I think I'm manic. I'm sorry. I'm gonna be real. Clark is so fucking annoying because not everything needs to be called out to. Clark learned that he found some shit for real. Clark's exploring is eventually interrupted by a noise and he says, "Is anyone there?" before it gets dead fucking silent and something throws the cutout of the caveman. And the entire time you kind of just feel like this dread that something is fucking coming. And Clark somehow manages to exit through the tiny door and made it back to the actual store, but not before grabbing a stool as a form of defense. And like I said, Clark, you're fucking annoying. Not everything needs to be called out to, and this is a prime example of why. You hear some shit, you get out. You're black. You're black. That's what we're supposed to do. If you hear some shit, you're automatically supposed to get the fuck out. Clark, don't piss me off. We cut to this really like off facility and we see a playback of Clark's night exploring the back rooms via the security camera that was in that, strange room. So other people do know about this place and they've also been watching it for quite some time. We then cut to Clark at another one of his sessions and he feels like he's going crazy. He couldn't sleep after the night prior. He's also hesitant to talk about it at first because he felt like he'd come off as crazy, which is fair. And he also like thinks his ass is going to be sent away, which is fair. Probably should be, buddy. And as he's talking to Mary about what he's found, he realizes he does in fact sound fucking crazy. Even though he sounds fucking nuts, he's even more fascinated by the back rooms and like he's even like made like a map of it. And I'm gonna say this, for a therapist, Mary fucking sucks at having a poker face. You can tell she's very concerned and he thinks like Clark has lost his fucking mind. Mary even like chalks this up to him being without alcohol and that his imagination is just running wild. And this irritates Clark and he tells her that he's going to go back to get proof and that she's going to have to owe him a major fucking apology. Those are literally his words. And this is where we really see Clark's character. He's aware of how he sounds, and because someone is having a hard time understanding or believing him, he just overly has to go off his way to prove that he's right. Yeah, not being believed sucks, but also no regular ass person would believe you intoxicated or sober. So Clark leaves and heads to Bob's and Kat's apartment and hires them to help him catch and record his proof on camera. Kat doesn't want to go and Kat doesn't want to be there, and her intuition is absolutely correct. And off camera, Clark had outlined the door with blue tape, and after they had gathered supplies, they walked through the fucking door. And apparently Clark had also been exploring every single night after the first night. He even made it down to the pool rooms. I have a question though. How did Clark make it that far on his own without encountering any entity during his exploration? I'm genuinely curious about that. We then cut to Clark, Kat, and Bobby as Bobby I'm sorry. He prepares to go down a steep crawl space since he's the one with the camera. The room Bobby enters, low key, reminds me of like a dirty ass laundry room. I know this room probably smells fucking funky. Like, I know this room is fucking rancid. And I don't know how Bobby was like unfazed by this because I was fazed by this, but there's a bunch of clothes in this room. You look over to a pile of clothes, you see a fucking head, and Bobby was just unbothered. I would have, tugged on the rope to go the fuck up. Bobby doesn't react, but decides that he wants to explore deeper. Why? Even when the lights fucking flicker, but he eventually encounters something that crawls around in like the background where the light initially flickered, and it freaked him the fuck out. So Clark and Kat hurry to pull Bobby up, and when he does eventually make it back up, the rope attached to him is like tugged and he gets pulled back down. I forgot to mention this earlier. When he was like getting ready to like go down, the rope was tied to a bed to use as like an anchor. The bed eventually flings into Clark and Kat, knocking them both down the fucking hole where Bobby and his crop top are done for, and Kat tries to run after her man. Terrible idea, by the way, sister, because she's also done for. This is the last time we're actually going to see Kat. So Clark is the only one who's left, and he grabs the camera. He's now the cameraman. He's running through the fucking back rooms like Laura Croft.
I'm running through your nigga house like the Tomb Raider.
And as he's running around, he eventually comes across the Christmas tree room. Honestly, really scary room because you just knew something was in there with him. This is when we're first introduced to like the still life entities. There's one that has like fiery red hair, which I guess is supposed to be Barbara. There's also one in a wheelchair with a lampshade. I don't know who that's supposed to be. After that, he runs towards like the pool rooms, which is probably like my favorite Backrooms level. But seeing it like this was so scary because I'm a hotel goer because I need a place to be grown. And it makes me so uncomfortable / scared. That's how I wrote it, because it felt so familiar. When Clark is there, he hears Kat and she's in the fucking walls. She can hear and see him, but he can't see her. And she said that she needed help and that it was going to come back to get her. And while Clark is distracted, we see something pick up the camera and get his ass. We then see a flashback of Mary from when she's a child, and we see that her mother never let Mary even peek outside, let alone leave the house. Mary's eventually woken up to realize that it was just a dream, and while she's sitting in her bed looking at the concrete handprint, she receives a phone call from Clark. Apparently he learned how to open a window from the back rooms to the outside world. He basically just called Mary to let her know that he wasn't going to be coming back. How did Clark make this fucking call? How can you call from the back rooms? Is there signal? Did he somehow managed to escape for a split second and decided to just go back? But the next day, Mary drives to Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire. That's the store name. Deadass. And we cut to some random ass man watching television with his family after popping some popcorn and watching a commercial for the furniture store. This is the same man that was watching the surveillance footage from the night Clark first came across the back rooms. Mary is probably worried about Clark based off of the simple fact that he is a client, especially because his mental state from the last time they spoke. So Mary probably decided to do some type of welfare check and basically moseyed on into the store. As Mary walks through the store, she finally comes across the downstairs area where the door is obviously open. She sees the layout and the whiteboard, and she also sees the blue outline of the door. What really shocked her was seeing a random ass fly just disappear through the wall. Mary was gagged, honey, and she couldn't believe it until she eventually walked through that wall. We can view this as like a therapist doing something a therapist is not really supposed to do, and that's putting themselves in their patient's headspace. In this case, Mary physically does that. Mary explored for a little bit, but she does stumble across like a wall with a bunch of drawings, and in the center of the drawing is a scary ass figure. Mary is interrupted by a noise and she calls out to Clark, who is hiding in the shadows. Mary, get out of there, girl. But he tells her to be quiet because something is in there with them. Something's in there with us, and you're also in here with us. So we're all having a bad fucking time, Clark. Their short catch up is eventually like cut short. Something is coming their fucking way. And while they're distracted, Clark puts fucking Mary in a sleeper hold and knocks her out, and he is apologizing and telling her that's for her own good. Nigga, what? We then cut to a flashback of Mary and her mother as her mother is being wheeled away in a psychiatric facility, and this is something that left Mary all alone. We then get a really cool shot of Mary's childhood home becoming distorted the further it goes down, and everything in this house is losing its key identity before it eventually becomes the Backrooms as we know it. And that shot was just so cool, and it was like part of like the first, I guess, trailer. I just thought it was like so interesting. Like you see something so personal and it's slowly losing its identity and it's becoming something else, something scarier. And we see Mary's memories and her trauma becoming one with the back room because it's now starting to remember her. Mary eventually wakes up and she's restrained to a chair at a dining room setting, and she's surrounded by these scary ass things called still lifes. They look like regular ass people but distorted as hell, and she's also with Clark's crazy fucking ass. He basically tells Mary that everything in the back rooms is just a copy of something or someone from the outside world, and Clark is tweaked the fuck out. And this is especially like prevalent when he grabs a chunk of a still life and said you can even eat them, and he even says they don't even feel pain. I have a lot of questions automatically. Were you just eating random stuff in the back rooms? Clark. We also learned like that Clark kind of made like the back rooms his home, and in the outside world, Clark is a very angry, sad, lonely man who had lost everything because of his anger. But in the back rooms, he somewhat has these things that he initially lost, but this time he has some like actual control. And I also forgot to mention, he opened the fridge and we see Kat's head. So Mary is rightfully so scared as fuck. She's even more scared after she saw Kat's head in the fridge. And Mary just knew that Clark was long gone. And she's trying to get Clark to let her go, but Clark isn't letting her go until they do another role play where Clark finally feels like he's right in his shitty life. So he's trying to redo the roleplay from earlier, and Clark is trying to set the scene. He had the scene set, honey. He had the big lights cut off with a little mood lamp and scalped the still life of Barbara and placed her wig on Mary so she could really be in character for this, you know? It's the same as their last session. Clark is apologizing for his behavior, for breaking the glass, staying out late, and, drinking. Clark then goes in on Barbara and how she doesn't do shit and that it was his house because I guess in their divorce, Barbara got the house. When Clark and Mary first do this role play initially, Mary made it a point to not feed into Clark's narrative of the situation when they did it during their first on-screen session. Now that we're in the space where Clark is now in control of the environment, he basically backs Mary into a corner where she has to see where he's coming from just for her own survival. And I'm not trying to reach or anything, but Barbara probably felt the exact same way so she wouldn't upset Clark. I think Clark was a very abusive man towards Barbara just based on his language during these role plays and also just how he behaves with her still life and also just how quick you can see him go from 0 to 10. He just has the look of a very angry man. Great acting, by the way. Honestly, if a person is willing to hold so much resentment and anger towards you and blaming you for all of their shortcomings, even if you're long gone from their life, that person is going to still make it your fucking problem, but will also push that problem and that resentment onto others who don't agree with them and their perspective. Mary eventually has enough and goes the fuck off on Clark and says that Clark was left because all he does is complain and basically expects wants the world to go his way without taking any sort of accountability for the shit he does get into. Mary was finally honest with Clark when she said it was all his fault, which is probably something she's been wanting to say to his ass without all the professional therapy speak. With that being said, however, I don't think Mary is a good therapist, because while there's a need to be professional, therapy only works if the person who's seeking it is being honest and if the therapist is also honest. Mary's honesty really did hit Clark, and he asked if he had to change, and Mary just wanted out of the situation. And he asked if he had to change, and Mary just kind of wanted out of the situation and tells him basically like he doesn't have to if he doesn't want to. And when he hears that, Clark comes into the acceptance that he doesn't want to change and that he is basically one with his anger and his emptiness. And eventually he decides to let Mary go. And when he cuts her loose, we see still life Barbara try to dip the fuck out because something's coming. And that something was Captain. With the entity, Clark tries to calm it down a bit, sensing it's upset, but Captain Clark bit into Clark like a fucking whopper. Due to Clark's acceptance of who he is and his refusal to change, he basically allowed it to consume him. Mary is able to make an escape, and we're in like a neighborhood looking setting now, still in the backrooms though. And Mary is trying to run away as the entity followed behind her. Mary runs through this sea of like couches, and she hit her fucking ankle / shin area. I don't know, it's either or. And she basically acted like she done broke her fucking ankle. Like, girl, get up. Get up! She eventually makes it out through like a crawl space. Skinty. I would have been eaten right there and then, girl. And she makes it through like a doggy door to another room with like a major fucking drop. And she manages to escape before Captain Clark could make it through like the actual door itself. You'd have to be body T to survive the fucking backrooms, because there ain't no fucking way. So the door Mary escapes through, it kind of leads back to the downstairs area of the actual furniture store. However, we are still in the fucking back rooms, okay? So Mary was hopeful that she made it out, but like I said, she's still there. The exit is closed off, and she is now left to face off with the fucking Captain Clark entity. Luckily, she was able to knock him down a peg, pun intended, but there's like a steam line of fucking smoke that like clouds the room as Mary is like close to her escape. Mary eventually falls down and she goes unconscious until she notices that Captain Clark nigga was on top of her, about to eat her ass. And luckily, she was able to bash him in the face and make it to another crawl space to an actual exit to the actual outside world. And when Mary exits, she's immediately like sprayed down by some people in hazmat suits, and she's dragged into a room where she's surrounded by people by said hazmat suits and white coats. They scanned Mary's brain, and then we cut to her being interviewed in the facility in which she entered after escaping the back rooms. The guy that was interviewing her was Phil, and that was the guy that was watching the commercial with his family for the furniture store. And Phil is asking Mary how she got in, and she's low-key nonchalant about it. Like, girl, what? Mary is also over being questioned, and she just wants to know where she's at, and Phil doesn't even know where the fuck they're at or what the fuck is going on. He's trying to get Mary to explain what the fuck the backrooms is, and even she doesn't know how to explain it. And that's like what I said earlier with the quote of, how can you explain a dog to someone who's never seen a dog before? I forgot to fucking mention, they brought Captain Clark into the real world and scanned his brain. Why the fuck would you do that? That irritated me. What the fuck? Are you so serious right now? And as Mary's sitting there in this interrogation scenario, we hear the audio fade, and we cut to her destroyed childhood home, now engraved and embedded into the back rooms. We see how life continues in the outside world through the back rooms. Mary's memories and even herself are now attached to the back rooms, where memory, space, and time are woven together in a fucked up way. We get like a sequence where we're seeing the backrooms continue to expand and mimic the outside world, especially regarding the characters who actually physically entered the space. We see Bob and Kat's home and their missing posters now embedded and remembered in the back rooms. And it's also kind of sad, but I'm also like, girl, what? Clark never received any missing posters because nobody really cared about him because of the loneliness he created for himself. And that is the end of our film. Time for final thoughts. One thing that this movie got right was how they took a setting and basically made it the main character. It may look plain or not visibly eye-catching, but I think that was the point. There can be terror in the mundane. I also really like how familiar it kind of felt. I'm not talking about like the Roblox games, of course, or like the edits on TikTok. What really made me feel that way was when we were in the Christmas tree room, and with the help of like the found footage style, it kind of made me feel like I was watching a Christmas memory from when I was like a kid, but with an actual uncomfortable feeling instead of that comfort you should feel. And that also goes with like the pool rooms. It made me feel like I was transported to a hotel pool area, which is something I frequent. One thing I did wish the movie did more of was flesh out the story a little bit more, because I do have quite a few questions that I don't have answers to, which I guess is fine. Like, how did Clark make it that far the first time when exploring? Why was Mary's mom like that? Like, those are some questions I wish were answered. Personally, I don't think this film has a lore issue. I think what throws me off with this film is how our characters also aren't fleshed out. I just wish we could have gotten more from our characters or more about our characters. If I was to give this movie a rating, I'd give it like a 3.5/4 stars out of 5. I think it was a very cool concept. It just needed a little bit more sauce. But in conclusion, the Backrooms, it's just what it feels like to have the big light on. With that being said, thank you for watching this video. I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.